Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from the North Central Research Station at Lahoma, where our colleagues are looking at the benefits of cover crops. Joining us now is Jason Warren, OSU's Extension Soil Conservation Specialist. And Jason, just give us an idea of what you and your team have set up in this field.
All right. Well, in this particular study, we're looking at nitrogen recovery from a summer cover crop in a wheat production system. And just to back up, cover crops they're getting a lot of interest from producers for a variety of reasons. But we're trying to find where they fit in Oklahoma crop production. And the first thing we want to look at is a continuous wheat cropping system under no-till conditions. And one of the benefits, or most evident benefits, is nitrogen. There's a rule of thumb that for every pound of nitrogen in this above ground biomass, you'll get a half a pound of nitrogen to the following crop. But there's a lot of uncertainty about that number. And so what we've done, and there's uncertainty based on the weather conditions after we terminate the legume. There's uncertainty as to the rate of decomposition of this legume based on what it is. So this is cowpea. It's a beautiful stand of cowpea. Back behind us we have a nice stand of a mixture of sun hemp and cowpea and mung bean. Then we have different mixtures of grasses and legumes. So we want to know how each of these cover crop mixtures influence the nitrogen dynamics of the following crop.
And this is set up with a continuous
wheat system, yes.
Okay.
We do also have some efforts looking at different cover crop systems and different rotations, but the primary is looking at the continuous wheat. We also and continuous wheat and then and rotations of wheat and canola, because you've got that long fallow period in the summertime where we're losing water anyway, so why not utilize it through the plant? Because right here you look at this, very little water is evaporating from this plot. Now the same, or if not a little bit more water, is being extracted from the soil in this plot versus just a fallow area, but there's no evaporation. And to me, evaporation is wasted water, where here it's transpiration. It's coming through the plant leaf and making nitrogen for us, or biomass in the case of the grasses.
Let's go look at where you've added canola in the mix too. So what do you have set up here?
Well, this study is a rotational study looking at the inclusion of cover crops in a wheat rotation, continuous wheat versus a rotation of wheat and canola. And so this plot here, this last winter, this was planted to canola. We had a marginal canola crop, but in general, canola doesn't provide us a lot of residue for the following crop. And in our no-till systems, we like to have a lot of residue going into our when we plant. And so we've planted this sorghum Sudan mixed with sun hemp, and then there's some cowpea in here as well. So the grass will provide us the recovery of residue, and then the legumes, the sun hemp and the cowpea, they'll provide the nitrogen to offset the nitrogen that this grass is taking up. And so we'll kill this, we'll terminate this cover today, and then in a month we'll be planting wheat in here. And then if you come over here, you can see, of course, this is our fallow plot where we're just chemically fallowing the wheat crop. And then when we get to this plot, this was wheat, and we planted a mixture of millet and cowpea in here. But then we also have a treatment that we mowed off or hayed off the millet prior to the termination. And we think this might be an option for canola producers, where we can plant that cover, remove its biomass, and then have a nice condition to plant canola in. But we'll also look at the unharvested condition as well on canola. And then lastly, we have a plot down here where this is a continuous wheat system. And in this, we just want to get nitrogen with some level of residue maintenance. So we've planted sun hemp, cowpea, and mung bean, but we're really excited to see how these inclusions of the cover crop influence the nitrogen requirement for the cash crop, the yield potential of the cash crop, and the soil moisture dynamics for the cash crop. You don't want to do something that's going to extract all your water for the sake of producing nitrogen and not have enough to grow your cash crop. But the idea is all this additional residue will protect any rain we get from the day we terminate it until the day we plant the cash crop.
So as producers are considering this and looking at these techniques specifically, you really need to keep everything up to date in terms of government programs as well. Can you address that?
Certainly. Yeah, there's been a lot of rule changes, and both from crop insurance perspective, your FSA office, you certainly want to talk to both of those groups. Now, the NRCS has kind of launched a soil health initiative, and cover crops are a part of that. And so there's pretty significant EQIP payments that you can get as incentives to try out cover crops. It also plays a pretty significant role in how you rank for CSP, the CSP program, or Conservation Stewardship Program. So you want, before you know, if you're considering using cover crops, you certainly want to talk to your Conservation District Office, your crop insurance agent, and your FSA folks, just to make sure that what you have planned ties into what you've got going on both your risk management and other incentive programs that you might be involved in.
Okay, great information. Thanks for sharing your research with us.
Yep, thanks.
Jason Warren, OSU's Extension Soil Conservation Specialist.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Have we seen the last of 100-degree weather this summer? It sure looks like it. The last day with a high at or above 100 degrees was Sunday, September 8th. 6 Mesonet sites came in at or above 100 degrees: Alva, Cherokee, Blackwell, Granfield, Wilburton, and Clayton. For 2013, Granfield, our top hotspot, had 44 days that reached 100 degrees or more. Oklahoma City came in with just 2 days that hot, and 13 Mesonet sites never had a triple-digit air temperature this year. In the scorching year of 2011, the last day with 100-plus temperatures was September 13th. On that day, 82 Mesonet sites reached 100 or more degrees. 6 locations hit 108 degrees. Walters hit 109 degrees. In 2011, Oklahoma City came in with close to 60 days at or above 100. The count for Granfield was a record-busting 101 triple-digit days. It's comforting to know that we are past September 13th, the last date of 100-plus temperatures for one of Oklahoma's hottest summers. Here's Gary with a look at our dry conditions.
Thanks, Al. Good morning, everybody. It's always great to be here on SUNUP with you. And as usual, like a broken record, I'm going to start with the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map. The dry weather and heat has certainly started to take its toll. You've probably noticed cracks in your yard, I certainly have in mine, as the soil moisture starts to dwindle. Now, the newest Drought Monitor map now has nearly an entire state with some color. That includes a spread of the more significant drought in southern and southwestern Oklahoma. Now, that yellow you see over much of the northeastern quarter to half of the state, that's the precursor to drought. So not quite drought, but it's certainly drying out. And the reason is pretty simple. We've had almost no rain since August 18th, again at least through Wednesday, September 11th. There were a lucky few folks like Kenton and far western Panhandle and Idabel in the far southeast. They received about an inch or so, but for those in between, nothing during this period. And actually this was the driest August 18th through September 11th on record for the state, dating back to about 1921. So almost 2.5 inches below normal. That's significant when you're in the heat of August and September. Now with drought, we're always looking for silver linings. So we're still better off than we were at this time in 2011 and 2012. Take a look at the relative greenness maps from the Mesonet's Oklahoma Fire Program for the second week in September for the last 3 years. You can see how much more green shows up in 2013 as compared to the same time in 2011 and 2012. Now, it's not exactly a lush green countryside out there across western Oklahoma this year, but certainly better than the last 2 years. As usual, we're looking for more rainfall, so by the time you're watching this, I hope it's raining where you are. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
When it comes to plants, only half the growing process takes place above the ground. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore with a way to make sure your plants have plenty of room to grow below the ground as well.
Soil matters. This is where plants get nutrients and water, but the availability of those key elements depends largely on soil structure.
Usually we have about 40 or 50% of the soil volume, which is just air, and is where actually most of the processes, the physical-chemical process, take part in the airspace. It's like a house where most of the action happens in the rooms rather than in the walls.
Andres Patrignani is a graduate student at Oklahoma State University from Argentina. He offered to show us how a producer might go into the field and examine soil structure using a worksheet available on our website. It all starts by digging up a block of soil with a simple garden spade.
And actually I had to measure the length. So I have a ruler here, and this is in the protocol. This is about 20 centimeters, which is a little bit less than 10 inches. And then what we had to do is to try to detect several layers. In this case, I'm gonna try to break it a little bit to see if I can find 2 different layers or just one. So it seems that there is a kind of a loose layer in the top due to tillage.
Patrignani will then examine each layer individually.
Now we start looking for some of the characteristics of the protocol, such as porosity, roots through the aggregates, or if the roots are clustered around the aggregates, that means that the roots cannot pass through the aggregates because maybe it's too hard, or maybe because there are not enough pores for the roots to pass through the aggregate. So that is actually something we don't want. We want the root system to explore as much as it can.
Once aggregates, or clumps, are broken down into roughly 1 centimeter pieces, you can follow the chart on the protocol and begin to classify that layer of soil.
There are some roots here, but just not too many since this is fallow now. So there are some here very small. So I'm gonna call it a 3, which is actually what usually happens in agricultural land. Most of our agricultural land is about 3 or 4. We rarely see a class 2 unless maybe it has been in no-till for maybe 20 or 30 years.
Then Patrignani moves on to the second layer.
And I can see it's very, very hard. This is probably a hard pan due to tillage. It's about 5 to 6 inches from the top, which is usually when we pass the disc. And so since it's hard, I see no pores. It's firm. It doesn't crumble in my hand. I had to actually put some strength and some force and break it. So here we are about probably a compact soil with few macropores. And actually, if I look my picture in the protocol, it's helping me to detect that this is a similar soil than classification 4, that's core number 4. Also, the blocks are kind of angular. See those very angular shapes, and every time I try to break, they don't crumble. They just have sharp edges. No macropores at all in the entire block. So this is something very, very typical of a conventional till field, where we don't have very much porosity compared to a no-till, where we will likely find a lot of pore space, at least in the very thin layer, which we didn't find here. The soil looks much looser maybe than a no-till soil, in the very top, but after 1 or 2 rains, then we have a very thick crust on top of the field, something that we don't have, for example, in a no-till field.
Once you have classified each layer of soil, a formula on the worksheet will combine these for an overall soil structure grade between 1, which is ideal, and 5, which is not. This field scored a 3.8, the average for conventional soil in Patrick Nani's research.
The question is, what do we do now? And with this information, we had to start taking some new management decisions to try to increase the soil structure because it might be limiting our crop production. So the point is that it takes time and it takes decision to do that, but certainly improving the soil structure of the soil will help us to improve and to rise our wheat yields mainly.
If you would like to take a look at the protocol Patrick Nani is using and to print your own copy, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and click on Show Links.
The latest supply and demand estimates are out, and our grain marketing specialist, Kim Anderson, is here to tell us all about it. Kim, let's start with wheat.
Well, there wasn't much with wheat. The production, 2.11 billion bushels, same as last month, slightly less than last year. You look at world production, though, for wheat, it is higher. That's negative for the market, just right above 27 billion bushels. So just a small change there. You look at ending stocks, they did come in slightly less than the trade expected, at 551 million bushels. The trade was expecting 561, and of course it's significantly lower than it was last year. The market impact, zilch. Essentially no impact at all. The market was trading about 696. It stayed about that area, and it's staying in that sideways pattern between 688 and about 724.
And when you look at the estimates for corn, are we seeing some of the same trends?
I've seen some of the same trends, but corn numbers didn't come in as expected. You look at production, the trade was expecting it to come in at 13.65 billion bushels, and USDA brought it in at 13.84. And that's above the August estimate, and that was a surprise. And of course, it's significantly higher than last year. You look at the world production, 37.68 billion bushels, essentially the same as last month. Ending stocks on corn was 1.86 billion bushels. The trade was expecting 1.7, so this is negative for corn prices. The August number, 1.8. You look at world, 5.96 billion bushels, 5.91 was last month, so not much trade there. So kind of negative for corn prices, I think.
Okay, finally, soybeans, how are they looking?
Now there's a positive market in beans. The September number came in at for production at 3.15 billion. The average of the trade was 3.15 billion, so a wash there. But if you look at ending stocks, USD lowered soybean ending stocks to 150 million bushels. The trade was expecting 161. So that's positive for soybean prices. And just as you could expect, the futures market with beans, they were up higher after this report was released.
Okay, you've had some time to digest this a little bit. Your analysis, your take on the situation?
Well, I think soybean and soybean prices are probably going to go higher. I think most of the market believes that the October report is the important report, and that bean numbers are going to get even tighter next month. That means producers are going to have to pay a higher price for their soybean numbers. I think wheat's just going to waller around. Corn maybe trade a little lower. Not much reason for corn prices to go higher.
Okay, Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Mid-September marks that time when we need to think about early weaning of some fall calves, especially if we're thinking about putting some of our calves this year in a value-added calf sale, such as an OQBN sale, because those weaning dates are right on us for those sales that are coming up in early November, even late October. Weaning time is a time where we need to think about reducing stress as much as possible for those calves so that they do the best job of continuing to grow and are then weighing as good as possible at the sale time. Fence line weaning is one of those management tools that has been researched rather extensively and we know does work. What do I mean by fence line weaning? That's just the process of absolutely just separating the cows from their calves only by a fence, where they can continue to hear and see each other, but just can't have physical contact. Research has shown us that when calves are fence line weaned in this manner, they'll walk less, they'll bawl less, they'll get over the weaning stress sooner than if they're weaned out of sight, out of mind. California research showed us that calves that had gone through fence line weaning weighed 23 pounds more than counterparts that were weaned completely separate from their mothers, but that was after 2 weeks' time. After 10 weeks or 2.5 months, that difference in weight was maintained, and those calves that were fence-lined weaned were still 26 pounds heavier than their counterparts that were weaned totally separate from their mothers. So as you're going through the weaning season this year, whether it's early weaning for some of those thin cows that you might think, well, we'll give them a little extra time to put some body condition back on, or you're targeting some of those value-added calf sales that are coming up in late October, early November, certainly I would consider fence line weaning as a management tool that you use. And when you use fence line weaning, especially in this very warm weather, make certain that there's adequate water on both sides of the fence, water that not only the cows can reach, but certainly those young baby calves have to be able to get adequate water, especially in these warm temperatures. Fence line weaning, it's a management tool that I think will pay dividends for you this year and every year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
The USDA just released the latest trade data, and we have our good friend Darrell Peel here to talk about it. And Darrell, let's go through the numbers. Let's start with import beef.
You know, we expected going into the year that beef imports would be higher. It's been down the last couple of months, was slightly down in this latest data for the month of July. And for the year to date, we're actually down a little over 2%. So, you know, depending on what happens here for the rest of the year, we won't see much of an increase, or perhaps even come in a little bit lower. You know, we're seeing an increase still in imports from Australia and Canada. But in this most recent month's data, New Zealand data was New Zealand imports were down significantly.
Wow, that's crazy. So let's talk the beef leaving the U.S. How are those numbers looking?
Almost the same story, but in reverse. Obviously, we're looking for an increase in exports. We didn't expect to see that on an annual basis, and we're not sure yet. But again, for the year to date, we've got an increase of a little over 2% in beef exports. For the month of July, total beef exports were up almost 15%. You know, the big leader there has been Japan. We've seen a rapid growth in exports of beef to Japan since about February or March, when they changed their import regulations relative to the age of beef cattle that were acceptable. We're also seeing increases to Mexico the last couple of months. That's been a nice change. Our exports to Mexico have declined almost continuously since 2008, but in the last 2 months we've seen a turnaround in that. We're seeing more beef exports back to Mexico.
Okay, from beef to cattle, what are we seeing as far as importing cattle?
You know, we import cattle from both Mexico and Canada into the U.S. From Canada, it's a mix of slaughter cattle as well as feeder cattle that go into feedlots. The Canadian numbers are up a little bit, but in terms of feeder cattle in particular, it's a small component of their total. Mexico is the biggest source of feeder cattle imports into the U.S. Last year's numbers were second highest ever at almost 1.5 million head, but it fell off at the end of the year, and so far this year we've seen a dramatic reduction. We're down year to date from Mexico about 46%. In July, we actually imported less than half as many cattle as we did a year ago in July. And so we're going to end the year significantly lower, perhaps down as much as close to 50% for the whole year.
Okay, so what does that mean for the U.S. cattle herd?
Well, feeder supplies of cattle have been getting tighter in the U.S., as you know, and of course one component of that is the Mexican and Canadian cattle imports. Mexican cattle imports represent about 4 to 5% of our total feeder cattle supplies. So we lose, up to half of that. We could be talking about an additional 3% or 2 to 3% in reduced feeder cattle supplies. That'll really further squeeze the availability of cattle, particularly with respect to volumes of cattle to go into the feedlots and packing plants.
Okay, there you go. Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Talking peanuts and cotton, with those plants really maturing now, we want to invite you to an upcoming field tour. The Caddo Research Station tour is Tuesday, September 24th at Fort Cobb, starting at 5 in the evening.
We have new varieties, we have new breeding lines that are soon to become varieties being grown there in plots and research trials. We also have disease control studies that I'm involved in, weed control studies, and then we have a cotton specialist from Altus who's got a lot of research there because they've been so dry in Altus they haven't been able to produce many good cotton trials there. So a lot of that's under irrigation there at Fort Cobb. So we'll be meeting there at 5 o'clock, and the producers are welcome to bring peanuts in, and we'll assess the maturity of the crop this year and kind of project when they should start digging based on the color of the hulls. We blast the surface of the peanut hull off, and you can look at the color change as they go from white to yellow to orange to brown to black. And when we get a high percentage of black pods, then it's getting close to digging time, and they all get excited about that. So it gives them some information, and then we tour the plots and explain the research that's going on there, and then we feed them afterwards and have a little informal meeting and allow the sponsors to talk about their products.
There's no charge to attend the peanut and cotton tour at the Caddo Research Station. For more information, contact your local county extension office. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and now Instagram. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.